Welcome to Exceptional Leadership. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. Though my focus is primarily pointed to leadership at an organizational level, let me assure you, most of what I share will translate to almost any aspect of life. Just tweak the info to fit your leadership role. Because whether you approach my content as a corporate leader, middle manager, small business owner, entrepreneur, or as a family member or friend, you are influencing someone. The question is, are you influencing well, exceptionally well? So let's take courage, exercise wisdom, and humbly invest in the people we are called to influence. Join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. It's always interesting for me to listen to fresh voices, to hear from people who are out on the trenches and actually those who are really learning leadership, because they always have these insights and these questions that challenge. And I end up learning so much more from them, and it grows me as a leader myself and as a trainer and a teacher. So today I'm super excited to share that we have someone who is, we'll say, newer to leadership. He's been practicing leadership probably for his whole life, but he is someone who does bring that fresh energy and inspiration and motivation to that realm. So I want to introduce Justin Jacobs. And Justin, you and I, we've known each other for a while. I'm just so thrilled that you're joining us today, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and welcome to Exceptional Leadership.
Thanks, Anita. Yes, so it has been a long time that we've gotten to know each other. So yeah, I've been in a bunch of different leadership positions and have really been interested in leadership most of my life. I first got thrown into a leadership class by my sixth grade teacher, who threw me into a middle school program to really teach the students there about character and different things of that sort. That's where I kind of first started getting into it and learning that maybe I wasn't the biggest into sports and more about making differences in schools and learning from that. So from there, I went to student council, then to college to do student government and fraternity stuff and all types of it. So I've been to tons of leadership camps, tons of different places to learn and really find my skills, ready to kind of hop into this and really get to share some knowledge, hopefully for some young folks to learn a little bit about what they can do to make a difference.
I know you have a ton of wealth to share with us, Justin. And what's exciting for me is I knew you back when you were a child, and I saw those leadership qualities that your teacher identified in you as well. But what is really interesting is how you embraced that. You didn't hold back. You didn't shy away from those natural giftings and abilities that you had, but instead you invested yourself in it. And so you have flourished and developed at a much magnified rate from what I typically see from those who even have raw leadership abilities. And I think anyone who's listening who may be an aspiring leader or they're new to leadership, not only can they learn leadership skills and tips from you, but they can also learn leadership attitudes and leadership passion from you. Because that's what I've seen that I feel like has definitely set you apart, because you're one of those people, Justin, that you by physical age, some would call young, but I would say in terms of leadership, you have an old soul. So one question I have for you starting out is, I know that your teacher identified you as a leader. She earmarked you and she put you into this group in sixth grade, but is leadership something that you feel like that you were simply born to do, or is it something that just came with others developing that in you? So was it nurture versus nature or nature versus nurture?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a nurturing trait. Anyone can be a leader. It really comes down to, it starts very young, in my opinion, where you're learning from your parents and your family and how they react with their friends, their different leadership traits. And then from there, when you go into school, now you're learning from your teachers and how they lead your classroom and how, they talk to other teachers and lead their groups, and seeing all of that and watching how they talk act, speak. So you really get to learn what they're doing. How are they acting? How are they speaking to each other? From there, you get to pull the good traits from you see as really beneficial and you see working with your family and your friends and your teachers and how they get your classmates to work together, and pulling all that stuff together and, taking the good traits and the bad traits really builds great leadership. That's what I would really stress to a lot of young people is take that time to watch, to listen, and to really, whether that's you're reading a book or you're listening to this podcast or watching all the leaders around you, you're going to pick up on what works and what doesn't. From there is where you can build how good a leader you can be.
That is wise advice, Justin. And don't you think it's important to really hone in on who you're listening to? There are a lot of armchair leaders out there, just like there are a lot of armchair athletes, and people have opinions. Everybody seems to have an opinion on something. And there are many who want to talk leadership. But one of my encouragements for those, especially who are younger, and as you said, they're in that listening and observation stage, is pay close attention to who you're listening to and who you're learning from and implementing ideas from, because there are a lot of people who have many things to say about leadership, but they are not necessarily successful as leaders. It's just like I've known people who give sage financial advice, and then you could look at their lives and you're going, why would anybody listen to them? They don't even have a roof over their heads. They're living out of their car, but yet sometimes they're the first ones to pop up with advice on how people should spend their money. Same thing with leadership. We really need to evaluate, is this a person worth listening and learning from? Is this an individual who does exhibit success in their leadership role? Because otherwise you could go off on a rabbit trail that takes you in a direction that is in opposition to where you want to go. So what are your thoughts about that, Justin? Have you seen examples where you think that's someone who's talking leadership, but they don't really walk the talk and maybe I don't want to listen to them? Or do you feel like just basically anyone who's given you leadership advice, it's been good?
Pretty much how I describe what you have said is you'll find those leaders along the line that are a do as I say, not as I do type of leaders. So to me, those are someone that'll say, let's all go out here and volunteer. Like we need to volunteer. We need to get our service hours for our organization or whatever it be. And then won't put in that work to, help you plan it or show up to the event, stay longer to clean up, whatever it be. The true leaders in the world are there throughout the whole thing. They're not going to sit there and just tell you, hey, go do this, go do that. They're going to be there by your side or behind you, pushing you through that whole scenario. So I think, when we see a leader like that, and that's something, as leaders grow, they see more of. And that's what I would really stress to new leaders is don't be a do as I say, not as I do type of person. Put in that extra work. It's just like growing up in sports. If you want to be good at soccer, you want to be good at baseball, you have to put in the practice and the time to become great at it. So same thing for leadership. If you want to be a really good leader, grow and be successful, the best way to do that is to lead from behind, be selfless, and do instead of say for anything you do as a leader.
I agree with you, Justin. And too many, I think, aspire for leadership because they think, oh, I just want to be in charge. I want to be in control. I want to boss people around. But that's not what true leadership is about. It's not being the boss. Being a true leader does mean that willingness to stand alongside your people, sometimes shoulder to shoulder. Your job, your role may not be to do the actual physical or mental work, but it is to inspire and encourage and support and be a part of the process with your people in that capacity that you're called to as a leader. So you do need to be in it with them, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's super important. No one likes to follow someone who isn't there helping them. Because then you're becoming a boss and not a leader. If you want people to follow you, you can't just tell them what to do. You have to tell them why they should do it and how they can do it and how they can be successful at it. Help them to dream on what it will look like if we do this. I think that's super important, and something that really you find lacking in some of today's leaders is people fall into that boss mentality where they're sitting there saying, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, instead of really building that vision around why. Why do we have to do this? Why is this important to our business, our nonprofit organization, our volunteer organization, whatever it be? Building that vision and that why is how you drive people into your organizations and really inspire the people in your organizations to go above and beyond for their clients, for the people they serve. All of that really starts with why.
You brought up two really key things there, and the one you just emphasized again, which is the why behind the what. I talk about this a lot. And a lot of leaders that I work with in my business coaching practice will complain and they'll say, I just feel like a glorified babysitter. And, the fact is, you are guiding your employees, your staff, your volunteers, whatever that role looks like for you, much like a parent guides their children. But when you are a caring parent, you do that from a want to see them thrive position. You want them to succeed. And so along with that, you are willing to provide the why behind the what. That's part of the investment that you make in them. But the other key point that you just made is something that I think our leaders really need to hear. You never stop listening. Yes, you may be in that early listening and observation stage right now, but in reality, that should never end. As a matter of fact, I think we should sharpen and hone those skills as we go. Be willing to listen to the people that you're leading. Oftentimes, they're on the front line in that process or in providing the service or creating the product. And because they're on the front line, they have insights and perceptions from experience that you don't have. So leaders, be very, very careful that arrogance doesn't set in where you think, well, I'm the boss, and so my opinion's the one that should matter. Well, your opinion does matter, but so does the wisdom that comes from people who are doing the job that you're telling them to do. So be very careful that you don't close your ears and stop hearing that valuable information that your people have to provide.
Yeah, I totally agree on that, Anita. And a big thing on that is leaders being able to take constructive criticism too, with those people that are on the front lines that might be following you. The way to grow as a leader is to really listen to what they're saying and take that information and really reflect on yourself on like, okay, how can I be better? How can I help them grow? How can I help us grow? Being a selfless leader means taking everyone's opinion and really thinking about it and making sure that you are making the biggest impact you can with all the information you have.
Absolutely. Amen and amen to that, Justin. So, Justin, you say that leader development or leadership development is one of your passions. And I know that I've seen that is absolutely true with you. I've watched you through the years and especially in your college years, I really saw that just magnifying you. It was almost like you were blossoming into this amazing leader. But why is it that you think leadership development is such a passion?
Yeah, so, in my early leadership days, middle school, high school, you're mainly being led by your teacher or, your sponsor of your group, and you're learning from them and they're guiding you down the right path to be successful. In college, you really don't get that. You are pretty much on your own to work with the different leaders that come from all different backgrounds and build something that is better than, the last four. That's what I always try to tell the people I lead. We're here to build upon what the last group did, because each group comes in and thinks in the mentality that we can help improve this better than how we found it, that just builds a great organization down the line. So a big passion for me in leadership is when there is new leaders that come in that, may not have a big background. That's what you find in colleges. With people coming from different backgrounds, everyone has different leadership styles. They learn from different teachers, all types of stuff. It's important that if you are an established leader, to find those different diverse thinkers and really build a good group. So build a group of people that are as successful as you are or more successful than you are, and that'll help you grow into a successful leader. So a big thing for me is I love helping people in organizations really get that aha moment, helping them with a task that I give them. They're planning an event and like helping them through and not giving them all the answers, right? You got to help people do that critical thinking. So that is the biggest inspiring and rewarding opportunity in leadership, is to really help people think through and grow. And that's what every leader should be looking for, those people to help them grow. Because the more strong leaders we have in this world, the better off we will be every day.
Yeah. And we need to be willing to inspire people to grow. We need to be able to invest in them and set our own egos aside. So many leaders that I work with are afraid, and they're afraid of maybe an employee looking smarter or better or whatever, however you want to define that, than they are. And so they become territorial and possessive, and they undermine their own potential, their own success as a leader, because they are just gripping things and they become micromanagers, and it's all fear-based. But when we are willing to pour into other people, actually it shines a light on us as leaders, because we prove ourselves as being someone who can act maturely, who can execute for the greater good. And we don't just make things about us. We're not selfish. We're not self-centered. But as you said earlier, we're selfless, and we do it because we care more about the outcome than anything about our ego in the moment. And what I have found is we get what we give. So when we pour into others, we end up benefiting anyway. And if we operate out of fear-based thinking, then frankly, the thing that we fear the most, we can actually create. So I think it's just smart, and it's strategic to be willing to give to others and not just hold things so close to the vest.
I agree. Totally. You'll find those leaders down the road that you'll really see and hear that, they're in a leadership position for the wrong reason. Being a leader doesn't mean just telling people what to do. You have to really teach. You're a teacher to those people below you. You're growing them, you're investing your time in them, and the end result is great work that comes from that. So I always preach, even in my job right now, that when we invest in people, the investment we put in people ends in a great work product. So the more time and leadership we invest into our people, the better off we'll be down the line, because now they feel empowered. Now they're motivated. Now they know who they're working with. And that is super important in this day and age, even in a virtual setting, is really investing in our people, because our people is the end goal of what leads our organizations.
You're right. And when we are willing to grow other people, it organically elevates us. We don't have to worry about trying to move up the ladder so much. We don't have to worry about how others perceive us, because when we're pouring into other people, again, it just pushes us to the top. So, Justin, one of my questions for you, because I hear this complaint commonly from the executive teams that I work with, and that is that people, when they're coming into the workplace, even those who maybe work for an organization for many years, and so say they're promoted into a position, a management position, but they have not really been taught leadership skills. And so there does seem to be a lack in our high schools and colleges. Not that there aren't leadership educational forums there, but it seems to be missing some elements that are needed in the marketplace, in the real world. And so actually I'm working on developing an online digital course to certify managers just because of this need. But I want to hear from you what your perspective on this is, because I know you have been through many leadership educational programs. And so how, if any, does that differ from what your experience is in a real world setting?
Yeah. So when you're in organizations, any time and age, like I feel like I've gotten the same experience, and you really fall into kind of a tunnel vision in leadership where you're getting stuff done, you have plans set up for you, you just get lost in time and don't really get to put in a lot of reflection time or learn from other leaders. You're just all pushing towards that one vision, that one goal, to be a better organization. And that's what leadership programs outside of the day-to-day leadership organizations will teach you, is you're going to learn about what builds a leader, what builds teamwork, what do you need to do to be a better leader. And that's what I've really learned through some of the activities that I've done outside of my organizations, is those programs are made for you to think outside of the box that you would normally work in. It gets you out of the tunnel and makes you think on those brand new ideas that you can bring back to your group and how you can really grow yourself, grow the people around you, and the end result, grow your organization. And that's what I've really stressed to some people, is a lot of times you're going to fall into an organization, and a lot of times you're going to fall into people that might be the same type of leader as you are. It's hard to find super diverse groups when you're falling into people that you like to surround yourself with, because there are certain organizations you can push yourself into to surround yourself with more diverse thinkers and stuff like that. But you're going to spend most of your time in those organizations that you feel comfortable around, and you don't have to put a lot of tough time into, because everyone in there is already on board with how you think and how they can move the organization forward. So you going into this different type of learning experience, you're going to learn, okay, maybe I've been tunnel vision on where I've been at, so this is how I can step out of the box and make sure that my organization isn't becoming stagnant. And that's what, a lot of our young leadership finds themselves doing until they attend one of these or participate in one of these workshops.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is a good caution for leaders of all ages and types and tenures. We need to be very careful that we don't surround ourselves with those who just tell us what our itching ears want to hear, or those whose thoughts just mirror our own. Frankly, as leaders, if we're going to be an exceptional leader, we need to be open to a challenge. We need to listen to diverse thinking. We need to be okay sometimes to agree to disagree, because that's where the creativity can rise to the surface. That's where solutions to problems that have been causing us to beat our heads against the wall can come from. So when we are willing to sit in a room with people who do think differently from us, I think it can take us to great places if we approach it with the right attitude.
Yeah, bringing in any outside thinkers into an organization really sets it up for a different sort of success. A big thing they preach in Greek life is traditions roll in 4 years. It only takes 4 years for that freshman to get through college and graduate. And then someone else can come in and help lead the organization somewhere else. Of course, when we get into the working world, it doesn't happen that fast, but that's where we can't fall stagnant anymore. We have to make sure that we are taking the experiences from the people coming in and make sure that we are, with the changing times, that we are really helping our organizations improve and not becoming stagnant.
Yeah, I think stagnation is poison. It's kryptonite for a leader. And I think that oftentimes leaders have fallen prey to stagnation, but they don't recognize it in themselves. Sometimes because they're maybe very good at challenging others, they assume that that's keeping them challenged when it's not. So I think for any listener that is paying attention right now, it might be good to do a consistent measurement with yourself and ask yourself if you've become stagnant in any areas, because it can absolutely destroy your ability to lead well. So great point. Okay. So Justin, let me ask you this. As a leader on the front lines, what are the most valuable pieces of advice you've received to date, and how have you acted on that leadership advice?
Yeah, so through my time, there's been a bunch of different people I've learned from, a bunch of different mentors. And the two things I would say are super important to how I lead is, the first is being that selfless leader and really leading from behind and talking about the why, because no one will be invested in what you have to say if you're just sitting there telling them how they can do it or, what they should do. You should always do the how, the why, the how, and the what. And with that, you'll get more people on board. I called this the motivating the middle. So if you split your organization into thirds, you're going to have 30% of the people that are fully on board, love your ideas, love your organization. You're going to have the second third that, are in the middle. They're not super invested, and they're not the bottom third, which is people that just, they're not fully on board. They might not be there for the right reasons, but they're in your organization. And then it's going to be super hard to motivate them. So you always have to focus on that middle and how you can get that middle to really come up and be super involved in your organization. And another thing that I really stick with is, being a visionary in your organization, always asking yourself what's next. I had a teacher in middle school that when I left to go to high school, she wrote me a card that said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." I think that means that anyone can step up and make a difference and be a change in the world we live in. And people just need to take that first step. They need to want to be a leader and really put in the time to grow those around them to become that great leader. And so those are the two skills and important lessons that I think today's leaders really need to know. They need to know they're empowered, and they need to know how to empower others.
That is so, so good. And you brought up visionary leadership. So when I'm teaching and training, I focus on two types of leaders, among other things, but two types of leaders. Visionaries are strategic, and then tactical leaders. So when you hear those terms, what do those mean to you?
We've been talking about the why, the what, the how through this. I think it's important for a well-rounded leader to have that visionary side and then to have that tactical side. But of course, you're going to have leaders that are good and weighed on both. It's kind of hard to be 50-50 on that. To be a visionary, that means very much a visionary. I'm a perfectionist on a lot of things. So I'm the type of person that throws out these huge ideas, and that most of the times there are just tons of ideas, but not really laying the tactical groundwork on how to get there. Some people are a tactical leader where they're putting out an idea, but already have the plan for it. So I think having both of those in a group is super important. And for a visionary, if you are a visionary, thinking down the line, if you have this great idea, is really putting in that work with your team to make sure that, yes, you have this super great vision, but now let's throw a little bit of groundwork in there to really help people understand why this is a great idea, what they have to do to get there, how they should get there, and really laying that vision and the tactics to really achieve that one goal.
Justin, it's so interesting hearing you describe it that way. Years ago, I had a very successful leader that I deeply respected say to me that he said, Anita, you fall into the rare 2% of people who are both strategic and tactical. Most are either visionary or they're executionary by nature. And I've thought about that a lot, and I've thought about why that is. And of course, I took that as a great compliment. And I do think it's one of the secrets to my success. But I think I'm visionary by nature, but I think I've nurtured that tactical side of my leadership. What I've learned to do is the vision is always clearly in my mind. I'm always asking myself, what's the target? What's the goal? What's the destination? But then I've learned to really challenge myself and say, what are the details necessary to execute so we can achieve that goal, so we can hit that target, so we can arrive at the destination that we want to go to? And because I've become so impassioned and committed to the executionary side, what it's done, it's supported my visionary, and it's helped me to do a lot of things that are really cool, I would say. So I love your perspective on that. Very good. So Justin, let me just talk a little bit. You brought up so remind me, what did you say? The who, the how. What were the points that you were making on that?
Yes. So the why, the how, and the what. So it's called the golden circle. Mm-hmm. So you have your why in the middle, and then you have your how, and then you have your what. This is something that Simon Sinek, you probably know of him, great speaker, and he really preaches this. One of his quotes from there is, "People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it."
Yes.
So that is a super important thing in the golden circle. You have to start with your why, and then you have to describe how people can get to that why. And then your what is this is what you need to do to get there. So what I do a lot in my organizations is your why is your vision, your how is your strategy, and your what are your goals. You have your one vision, you have a couple strategies on how you can get there, and then built from your strategies is all of your goals that you have to do these to get there. Is really how you can build motivation and motion behind your vision and how to take your organization to the next step.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting as I think about that, I think almost like the why, the how, and the who, those really are more visionary types of questions that we ask ourselves as leaders. But then I think the what, the when, and the where, which I know you didn't bring up, but I think of those as being more the tactical. And it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever really recognized this about myself, but that is one of my ongoing ways of measuring. I measure processes this way. I measure success this way. I measure like projections this way, but I will ask myself, and I'll go through those 6 questions. What is the why, how, who, what, when, where? And by doing it, I think it encompasses then both that visionary and that executionary side of leadership. So fascinating. Okay. So Justin, let me ask you this. I know that you are adamant about leadership training early in life. Why do you specifically think that is so important?
I kind of touched on this a little bit at the beginning, and it really comes down to the earlier you start in life. It's like starting playing baseball as a super small kid. You have the tee up there, and your dad or your mom is telling you to swing at it. And that's really kind of how leadership starts. You're learning from people around you. They're setting it up for you. This is, how they want you to learn leadership. And then as you get further on in life, you start to get these coaches, they're teaching you how to swing, how to throw the ball, how to catch the ball. And then from there, you're fine tuning your skills. You're growing better at it, you might start to coach other people at it. And that's really, I would say, leadership is super similar when it comes to comparing it to being prepared in a sport. And of course, in sports, you'll become a leader as well. Definitely, because you're going to learn those leadership skills from your coaches, from your players around you. And I think it's super important that at a young age, we start to surround ourselves with good leadership and good leaders, and start to go to those trainings to really fine tune your mind on how you can start to make an impact in the groups that you want to be a part of. And then from there, you're just going to really become a good powerhouse leader, who can filter out the good traits on how to be a leader. And really, when you're watching other people, listening to other people, you can really find those bad traits that are like, you know what, if I would have done that, I would have done it this way. And really taking the failures that you have and learning from those. As a leader, you always fail. It's just a part of being a leader. And a big thing that we always used to stress in student council in high school was always to have a plan C, right? So everyone's like, yeah, plan A, plan B, but really thinking through the different activities you do or different organizations you lead, and make sure that if you fail in A and B, that's okay. It might be something you pull together right away, but you're going to learn from that experience. And from there, you're not only teaching yourself on how to be a better leader, but you also just taught everyone that was in your group on like, okay, this is where this went wrong, and this is what we need to do next time to be better. And that's super important in early leadership training.
It reminds me of a guy that I know who's now in his early 80s, very successful businessman named Bruce Carfit. And Bruce is the one who taught me many years ago that when you are making a plan, we typically, especially as leaders, we plan to succeed. But he said you should always have two plans. You should always have a success plan, but you should always have a failure plan. He said plan to fail. And then ask yourself, if failure happens, what am I going to do? That has been such an insightful and creative exercise for me through the years. And frankly, it's saved my tail a few times. So I think that kind of goes along with what you're describing there too. But I like the plan C mentality with that. And Justin, let me ask you, have you ever read the book Outliers?
I don't think I have.
Okay. It's written by Malcolm Gladwell. I love this book, but I was reminded of it when you were talking about the importance of practice in leadership. When we fail, and if you could see me, I would have air quotes around that word, but the word fail to me just means learning. We really haven't failed. We're just learning how to do things differently, how to do things better. But in the book Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell makes the point that it takes an average, and he did an intensive study on this, it takes an average of 10,000 hours of practicing something to master it. And I think that's true. I know for myself as an author and a public speaker and a business coach, I definitely have gotten my over 10,000 hours in those areas. And there is a big difference. It's almost like once you hit about the pinnacle of that period, it's like things start getting easier. Before that, you're having to grind and push up to get to the top. But once you reach around 10,000 hours of practicing something, you've learned so much along the way. You have failed, if you will, but you've just learned how to do things differently. And so then it becomes easier. And suddenly what's been such an uphill push and climb, suddenly you're now getting to the top where you can start going down. So I love that thought. And I think it just aligns with what you're talking about with practice and leadership.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, I don't think I'm at 10,000 hours yet in leadership. I'm still learning every day on every different aspect of your life. You're going to learn from different leadership styles. And even for young folks moving into the workforce, you kind of you're going to start at the bottom of the food chain. You got to now learn how the people who run the company you're at lead the company. What is their leadership style? How can you learn from them on how to grow in your company? And that's you putting in those more hours to really fine tune and become an expert. I work in an accounting firm, so we have partners that are at that 10,000 hours. They have seen everything or mostly everything and really know what is going to happen before it happens. That's what you really figure out when you get to those 10,000 hours is you're now preparing for something bad to happen or for possible failure. You know how to plan for that. You won't be blindsided. So I think, yes, it is super important to continue to put in those hours to become an expert down the line.
So in closing, Justin, my last question for you. If you could leave our listeners with one more tip or insight or encouragement, what would it be?
When I served on the board of directors for SEMO nationally, and the president of the board told me a good, I guess, idea quote one time that was an organization is judged based on how well they pass the baton, pretty much. So how well can you transition your organization once you leave? And I think that really comes back into how well are you teaching the people below you? I guess the one insight I would give to the listeners is don't be afraid to turn around and really look at those followers that are following you and pick them up. Make sure they love what they're doing. Make sure they know the why and make sure you're listening to them, because you doing that inspires them to be who you are. And thus you are growing them into a leader.
I think that's a great place to land. And I think it also enhances what we were talking about in the previous question. I think if we do those things that you just described, even when we have to be firm and we have to be tough, and sometimes in leadership, the moment just calls for that, our people will always understand the heart in which we are doing that. And when we put the heart, even in with the hard, people will follow us anywhere that we need to take them. Justin, thank you so much for being my guest today. This has been such a pleasure. I knew that we would have some great insights to share, and I want to have you back on a future episode. Are you willing to come back?
I would love to, Anita. This has been a great time. I've enjoyed learning from you, even on some of the insights that you've had on this podcast. And I hope the listeners have really enjoyed what we've put together for them.
I think they will. Well, sounds great. And I would just encourage you, Justin, keep doing what you're doing because you are absolutely an exceptional leader. And listeners, for you, as always, I want to remind you that every day you have a choice because you are influencing someone. But the question is, are you influencing well, exceptionally well? It's a decision you make, and then it's the actions you take. So make sure that yours align with the legacy you want to leave. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. And I just want to remind you of a truth. If you are not leading at the level that you want to be at, remember, it is never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. You can start today. You can start making a difference. You can help the world become a better place. You can begin to lead with intent. Your family, your friends, the people you work with, your community, in your church, in our nation, across the planet. Whatever opportunities come your way, remember that did not happen by accident. And by stepping up and leading exceptionally well, you will help fulfill the purpose you were created for.